Hi, you're listening to Unbuckle Your Fears. I'm Megan Barrow. I'm a lived experience speaker and advisor sharing my story and experiences of agoraphobia, anxiety, panic and phobic disorders, depression, suicide and complex trauma. In this episode, I'll be sharing my experiences of depression. First, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people as the traditional owners of the land I'm coming from today in Melbourne, Australia. Also, support my advocacy work and this podcast. If you're enjoying it, please subscribe on your favourite podcast platform and give me a rating. Also, you can follow me on Instagram at Unbuckle Your Fears. I'm also on LinkedIn. The link will be in the description. And if you want to check out some of my journey, you can head to unbuckleyourfears.com. I'd like to also extend a content warning that this podcast will discuss depression and suicide. If it brings up any emotions or distress, please reach out to your local support service. In Australia, it's Lifeline on 13 11 14 or Beyondblue on 1300 22 46 36. And with that, I will also say that if your headspace isn't great, this might be an episode that you want to skip right now. So, as mentioned, this topic is on depression, so I will be talking about my experiences, my symptoms, and thoughts of suicide. So, it may be a topic that you're not up for today. This podcast isn't going anywhere, so you can always dive back into it when you're in a better headspace. Quickly, before I get stuck into this, I do also want to extend an apology for people who are listening in real time. Bless you. I'm so thankful to see people downloading and listening to this podcast before I even promote it. But there will be a few of you who will have heard last week's episode, which was clearly the wrong file upload. I apologise. There may have been some swearing at my cats. This was an unedited version that accidentally uploaded instead of the edited version. This has been rectified. Again, my apologies. But it is interesting that when I discovered it, thanks to a friend who, luckily, timing is everything, asked to listen to the link for the podcast for someone she may know. When she told me that I don't think this is what you want in your podcast, I just literally felt my stomach fall to the ground, and I didn't have a panic attack, but gee, the adrenaline was pumping. I raced to my computer, and when I realized what had happened, I was like mortified, and I thought, I can't continue. I'm going to delete the whole thing, and I am mortified. I'm going to disappear, pretend this never happened. What a stupid idea for me to do a podcast. Well, of course, I fixed it pragmatically and then decided that, keep going. That's my motto, right? Keep going. And also, I've also learned that, pick yourself up no matter how many times you fall. So I'm on about the 12,311th time of picking myself up, and you just keep going, right? So here I am. And again, apologies. So I thought it was important to talk about depression, not only just from that's my lived experience, but I'm kind of a little bit disappointed that I don't see many people actually talking about it within the context of anxiety. Now, I have even seen some people talk about, let's not talk about depression. Just because you have anxiety doesn't mean you'll be depressed. 100%. But talking about it doesn't mean that we are giving you permission to be depressed. But I tell you, if we don't talk about it, people who are experiencing it may feel very isolated without realizing that there's a lot of us that experience both anxiety and depression, and I am one of them. It's also unfortunate that people seem scared to talk about suicide. Now, I want to caveat this, that it's super important for people who share stories and talk about mental ill health that they understand safe storytelling and safe language around mental ill health and suicide. And this is about protecting and having a duty of care to our audiences to keep them safe, but also not adding stigma to any mental ill health. So I am trained in it. I've been a speaker with mental health organisations since 2012, and I've also even run a workshop on safe storytelling through Mindframe. So I did some lived experience with them. I was in one of the working groups for a project, and it was an absolute honour to share the stage with someone that I have huge respect for, and we actually talked about safe storytelling. So it's really important for you to know that I have got you covered. One of the important things is that we do not talk about method or location. It is really important that we don't go into detail. So I will not be doing any of that. I'll be keeping within the absolute guidelines. If you are interested in sharing your story in any way, whether that's speaking, a podcast, TV interviews, social media, blogs, whatever, really encourage you to Google safe storytelling for mental health and suicide, and you can check out Mindframe. So I will add the website link in the description if you want to check that out. It's really an amazing resource of the do's and don'ts about talking mental ill health and especially suicide. So the other thing I thought was really sad is I came on as a guest speaker, for better want of a word, for an agoraphobic support group about a year ago. And after telling my story, we had questions, and someone sort of said, look, I know I'm not allowed to ask about the S word. Am I allowed to ask about the S word? And I said, do you mean suicide? And they said, yes. And I think it's really sad that, again, that we're not talking about the reality for many of us that we may have suicidal thinking when we have anxiety, especially if we're really experiencing agoraphobia and major fear and our life is completely affected. I think it's important we talk about this topic. It is my experience. I know it's others. And it's also important to know that talking about suicide doesn't increase the likelihood of suicide as long as we do it safely. So that's where I'll start diving in. That, yes, I've experienced depression, and it's been mild to clinical at different stages of my life. And the first time I really experienced it was at 14. I was going through some bullying at school and at home, and everything around me felt unsafe. And that is also when I had my first suicidal thinking. I wanted my life to end. I saw no way of getting through what I was going through. I had no relief. I was go from school to home and would be sort of isolating myself from the stresses and the bullies. And it was a time where I had extremely low self-worth. My anxiety increased. I think that's really important to talk about, that often they go hand in hand, that my experiences, and I think there's a lot of research that will also agree with this, that anxiety and depression absolutely go hand in hand, that one will increase the other's likelihood. So when I'm depressed, I can be more anxious. When my anxiety is really severe and it's interfering and impacting my life, I can be more prone to being depressed. So I think that's really important to talk about. I can't actually remember at 14 the other symptoms I was going through. My memory is I was just so terrified and dreaded every single day. I kind of thank my anxiety that I think because of my what if brain and overthinking, the thoughts of suicide just went no further than a thought. And then I just remember thinking, okay, well, that's not going to happen, so I'm just going to have to work out some way of coping. So it was an incredibly difficult time, something that still to this day brings up really raw emotions. I'm a very visual person, and I can just remember key moments of that time and pretty much not talking to many people at all. So I very much almost like, we've talked about agoraphobia almost being like a cocoon. I guess I was starting to cocoon myself that just sort of avoided anything that might hurt me, which was people at that point. I kind of got through that period. Again, it's something I talk about in my speech that I don't even know how I did that. When I look back, I was just an incredibly resilient, I hate the word resilient, but I was clearly someone with a strength that just kept going, just sort of, I'm also not stoic, but that kind of stoic momentum of just get up and do what you need to do to get through. I probably saw no way out. In those days, you didn't miss school for these things, so I just sort of quietly sat up on my own in school, and until someone lovely reached out to me and asked me to sit next to them. By the next school year, everything kind of died down, and I sort of found sort of my circle of friends again and sort of built my confidence back up. So that was my first period of depression. It was something that I didn't articulate to anyone. The closest I came to was talking to my younger sister, who would have been 12 at the time, and just said, I wish I could run away if there was somewhere I could go. So that was sort of the despair. I just wanted to sort of disappear, but I didn't have anyone to really go to. So I stuck it out. My next bout of depression was probably around 20, in my early 20s. And it's a period that's really a weird one for me, because I'd certainly started having panic attacks, which you can sort of dive into in other episodes. But I was in a stage of having panic attacks that were undiagnosed, and clearly I just wasn't coping with life beyond even that I started to avoid friends and social connections, and I was kind of self-sabotaging everything. So I was also going through a lot of family upheaval. I probably wasn't coping and was thinking I was coping. In retrospect, I was so young. I'd been through a lot of upheaval over a number of years, and I think my mind, body and soul just wasn't coping. And again, without any systems or support structures around me, no one was picking up that I wasn't doing so well. And I think because I was always deemed that shy, quiet girl, that people didn't necessarily question if I was staying in on a Saturday night. And people didn't really question, hang on, are people actually asking you out and you're not going out? You were going out. Why are you not going out now? Things around me were falling apart too. University was really difficult. My anxiety was really getting in the way. So I was failing university and not turning up. So all that, it felt like I could do nothing right. I was always someone that was really tired and exhausted. Again, was that anxiety or was it depression? Who knows at that point of time? But I found that I was crying and just not coping in situations. I remember my sister's 21st, so I would have been about 22. The night started fine, but somewhere sort of around speeches, and everyone was sort of drinking a lot and having fun. Everyone was having a blast, even the older people in the family. And I just realized that I just didn't belong. I was having trouble sort of drinking or enjoying the night. And I literally snuck up into my room, turned off the lights and went to bed and bunkered down there, and I don't know what I said to sort of escape the party, but I just remember crying in my bedroom, and I could hear everyone, all of my sister's friends, going out to go off to a pub or a bar afterwards, and everyone's sort of laughing and so happy, and all I could do was cry, and I knew I was meant to be there. I knew it was my sister's 21st. I was meant to be having fun. I'm 22. What's wrong with me? And I was just in despair. So clearly I was going through a depression. This was something I never talked about. It's something I sort of understood later in life, that this was clearly a time of depression. The next episodes of depression, whilst I was probably in a depressive state, more often than not over the next few years, the next real period that I identify was when I was in agoraphobia, in the depths of agoraphobia. And this was the closest I came to taking my life, that I started acting on a suicide plan, and I was on my own, and it was the middle of the day. And thank goodness I stopped mid-plan. And it's very traumatic to actually think how close I came. And it was actually something I blocked out of my memory for about 20 years. And when I remembered it, I was in despair. I just had a full-on trauma response, realizing how close I was to taking my life, or an attempt on my life. And I remember, move forward, say 8 months, when I was in my first session with my psychiatrist. Again, you can listen to other episodes where I talk about the agoraphobia recovery. But I mentioned how depressed I was, and I remember my psychiatrist saying, look, that's pretty understandable. So he didn't fixate on it. And that's also part of the reason why I think it's important we talk about it, because when he said that, that gave me some permission and feeling that I was normal to have had these feelings and these episodes of severe, what was clearly clinical depression. I couldn't stop crying. It was all the cliche, I hate using that word, but all those cliche archetypes of depression and suicide, that I was just inconsolable, that I couldn't get out of bed. I lost a lot of weight in this period. My mum says that I was locked away in my room for weeks, that she would knock on the door and try and get me to eat. I actually don't remember that. I remember being sort of closed up in my bedroom, but I don't remember the duration of it. It just felt like everything I did was a failure. Something as simple as my car battery dying on me because I wasn't driving, right? But I would try and keep the car running by turning the car on, and leaving it running in the driveway because I wouldn't drive it anywhere. And then, of course, that's not going to keep the battery alive for too long. And then my car died and I felt like, oh my God, I can't even keep my car alive. Like, I can't leave the house, I can't work, I can't do anything without people. I'm scared without people. I need people around me. I can't do anything. I'm lucky to have a shower. So having my doctor say that was understandable, and when you look back at it pragmatically, it is absolutely understandable. So if you are in agoraphobia, if panic and anxiety is really interfering with your life and your independence, if you're going through trauma, if you are in any state of a situation that's really affecting you, it is completely understandable that you would feel these feelings. I want you to know you are not alone. This is not something that you should be ashamed about. I felt ashamed. I didn't know where to go. I don't think I really told people. I told a few people because I needed help in the moment, but I was really struggling. And this was a time before internet was really a thing. So I certainly didn't have a computer. it was a year before I got a computer, and then sort of got onto the really early days of online forums, and they were really helpful. But today you've got these services that you can ring up, support services. Mind you, something like Lifeline would have been around then. I wouldn't have even known it existed. I probably wouldn't have called. When you're depressed, you sort of don't feel like you matter. I think it's really important too, if you're listening to this as a loved one, that it's really important that you try and lead on some of this too and really help support someone, because it's really hard to ask for help when you're that depressed. So, yeah, it was an incredibly difficult time. But again, I think what I really did in the moment, so you might be thinking, look, she talked about sort of almost sort of making an attempt on her life. What stopped her? Well, again, thank goodness for my anxiety brain. But what I ended up doing really was, I remember crashing to the floor and bawling my eyes out. I'm on my own, and I just thought of my half-sister and half-brother who were babies at that point. They are now 33 and 31, or 34, nearly 34 and 31. So this is a long time ago. And yeah, I just remember thinking, I just want to see them grow up. And then I thought of my sister, and that was enough for me to think I just have to get through this. So I didn't have the mental health understanding to even know about self-care or things like that. But hopefully, and I'll talk about this at the end of the podcast, but hopefully our literacy and the resources around us are much better now. I don't think they're perfect. I still think it's a lot of reliance on us to get through, when really we need systems and people around us to help us get through. But do know you're not alone in having these feelings. But really importantly, just like what I say about agoraphobia and anxiety and panic disorder and phobic disorder, you can get through. I need you to know you can get through, that life can be amazing. If you had have told me in these moments of being 25, I can see myself on the floor right now in the depths of agoraphobia, wanting to end my life. If you could have told me where I would end up, I would not have believed you, and I would have thought, oh wow, that's impossible. I'm not sure I believe you, but okay. Now, it's taken me a long time to get to this point, to be a speaker, to give back, to run my own business, to live independently in my own home, to go off and enjoy life, to do boxing, to do pottery, to volunteer, to see friends, but I'm here. And gee, I'm glad I stuck around. So as I worked through my agoraphobia, not obviously, but my depression certainly took a back seat too. So I was pretty okay for another maybe 10 years or so, maybe 10 to 12 years. And then I had another bout of clinical depression. I couldn't even tell you why. There was no situation necessarily around me that I can really put a finger on, except if it was just everything accumulated. But I was working, and I was going through a stage of just not coping. I just wasn't coping at work. I was finding that I was crying more often. I was crying more easily. I do a lot of crying at home, but I'd also sort of break down at work over little things that never used to faze me. I was still dealing with work stress quite well, but if there was something that had gone awry or someone wasn't happy with me, I couldn't sort of push my way through as easily as I normally did. In this circumstance, I was literate enough in mental health and my mental health to know that something was a little bit askew, and I made an appointment to see my GP, who I'd been seeing for a long time. And I should note that I was only seeing my psychiatrist a couple of times a year at this point to sort of check in and sort of get script updates for my medication. And when I saw her, I said, look, I think I might be depressed. I want to make an appointment with my old psychologist and sort of just touch base with her because I want to sort of nip this in the bud. She's like, okay, well, and she gave me the K9, K10. I always get that mucked up at the checklist to go through. And she sort of reviewed it, and as we were going through it, and her tone sort of quietened, and she's like, right, so you actually have depression, and I think what you need to do is go and see your psychiatrist, not your psychologist, and speak to him as soon as you can. I'm going to give you a week off work. And I was like, this is serious. And I just burst out into tears. I was just inconsolable. I took a week off work. I went to my psychiatrist and said, look, my GP told me to come. She thinks I have depression. He's like, okay, well, let's see. And sure enough, he also diagnosed me with depression. I felt like I had no support around me. I'd actually been reaching out to family members and saying that I was suicidal and that I wanted to end my life, and they weren't great support. I was now at a stage where I could articulate I needed help, but the people around me were not great. My psychiatrist had a word with my mum, who had to take me, so that's something I'm missing, that my anxiety was really bad at this point. So I'd had periods. So again, you can hear about my anxiety recovery and the ups and downs of it in other episodes. But my anxiety had been quite good. And then in the past 6 months, and I'm now having memories of things that I just wasn't coping with. I would just escalate from 0 to 10 in anxiety and stress and tears so quickly over just things that should have been manageable. Some of them were kind of shitty, but manageable. Most people wouldn't have escalated so quickly. And I was dramatizing everything. I was catastrophizing. So my psychiatrist had a chat with my mum, who had to take me because, my anxiety was so bad that she took me. And I couldn't get there on my own. And at that point, when I sort of left his room, he'd sort of said, look, you're going to go home with your mum. And my mum was incredible. So I don't think she had actually realised the gravity of the situation. And that's all he had to do. And maybe coming from a doctor, a psychiatrist, saying this is really serious, I probably should have been in hospital. I certainly should have been in hospital when I was 25 in agoraphobic. And that's a bit I forgot to mention too, that my psychologist actually, when I told her that I was suicidal, that she actually was going to admit me. So it was a real fight for me to not end up in hospital. I think she gave me grace because of my agoraphobia, because I was just terrified of the thoughts. So there's been a few times as I reflect that I probably should have been in hospital and admitted. But so I'm 37, 36, and I go back with mum for a good week or two. He gave me medication. He actually was always amazing that he set me up for success in that he told me that the medication would take about 4 weeks to work. You're going to be off work. You're going to come in every 2 weeks. I'm giving you I'm going to organise a 2-week certificate for you, get it through your GP so we don't have to talk that it's about depression or mental ill health. The medication, you'll probably feel really nauseous to begin with. Stick with it. That will settle, and within 4 weeks it should work, but let's see how we go. And that's exactly what happened. So I just remember going back to mum's. We dropped into my place, picked up a few things, picked up my cat who had to come with us. And I just have a memory of being in the spare room and just being in bed, just unable to get out of bed. I kind of talk about that, depression, you can't sleep, but you also can't get out of bed. That I would almost sleep all day and then stay awake all night. My sleeping patterns had totally sort of gone topsy-turvy. So a lot of disrupted sleep, even during the day. I was just exhausted. Again, I lost a lot of weight. I probably lost 5 kilos, half a stone within a month. I just had no energy. I felt a burden. It's just an awful time. Absolutely awful. And what I needed, which is what my doctor gave me, was just time off to recover. So within a few weeks, the medication started to work. I certainly did feel really nauseous at the beginning, and then slowly the medication started to work. And then bit by bit, I went back home after maybe 2 weeks and still rested it out. I also went to my psychologist. My psychiatrist was happy for me to have a chat with her too, if that was helpful. So she sort of helped in the sort of just chatting. In the end, I took 6 weeks off work, and the medication, and I've mentioned this in other episodes, that this medication I was on actually really helped with my anxiety. So all of a sudden I just felt like my brain chemistry was normal. What I understand must be normal, that I'd never felt this way in my life. And I am still on this medication to this day. I've decreased the dosage, but it's part of what I need to be me and healthy. So yeah, I got through, ended up back at work and started to thrive. So work wasn't great, but I found my jive in another job. So, sort of found my new place in the world. And yeah, as my depression decreased and the medication worked, my anxiety started to decrease, in a sense of I still had panic attacks. I was still sort of dealing with high anxiety, but yeah, I was able to push through. And that's also the point where my anxiety freedom started. So ironically, my depression diagnosis and medications ended up leading into my next phase of recovery from anxiety, agoraphobic disorders. Since then, I've certainly had bouts of depression, and it's something that I now manage from time to time. I haven't had a bout in a while, and it's probably something interesting that I reflect on, that as my anxiety eased, that depression probably took more front and center, that it's almost like when my anxiety's forefront, that's what's forefront. But when it's sort of in the back seat, some depression issues come through. That's really balanced out now. It's certainly balanced out since I've worked on my trauma too. So that's a whole other episode I'll talk about with dealing with my trauma. But yeah, in the last decade, I've sort of had a bit of a roller coaster, but since walking away from the controls of a trauma situation, I've really, bit by bit, got my strength and my identity. And yeah, I can have bouts where I've had self-doubt or low periods, but they're really just periods. And I also have learned, I guess the lessons for me is to just keep going. So very similar to the panic disorder, phobic disorder, and agoraphobia, is to just keep going. That things will get better. Everything passes. So I know that the depths of depression are just horrible, and it feels like you're not going to get better, and it feels like nothing's going right. But just stick it out, because it can get better and will get better. You have to meet people halfway. You need to go and get help. You may need medication. You may not. Maybe it's just talking therapies. Whatever it is, you have to actually do a bit of hard work. And then what I've learned is tapping into self-care that works for me. So to look after my mental health, which is depression and anxiety and all the realms of, I do things like boxing. Boxing and fitness is really important to my mental health. Going out for walks. I'm not great at it. I don't love a walk, but if I find a place that I enjoy the houses in my area, or if I'm down at by the beach or find some parks, I'm very lucky that I live in an area in Melbourne that has lots of beautiful parks. Even just going for a short walk, and I find that even just sitting in a park or sort of sitting by a tree, just that nature bathing is really important to my self-care. Self-care to me is watching reality TV. I say this in my speech and it does get a laugh depending on the audience, but gee, Real Housewives, gee, bravo, and Andy Cohen, thank you for my mental health. You are such self-care for me. I can't even tell you. I repeat watch some of the Real Housewives. It's fodder, it's silly, it's drama, it's a soap opera. It is so helpful for me to just escape. Again, things like a movie. I love classic movies. I'll rewatch movies that make me feel good. Old comedies, comedy shows, whatever it might be. I love music. I will just listen to music. It's actually been a lifeline for me my entire life. So at 14, I can even remember that I would just escape into my bedroom. So a lot of that escape at home was just having earphones on and listening to mixtapes that I'd curated from the radio. And this is the olden days of the 80s where you'd record off the radio. But now, I mean, I still have an iPod, so I still curate my music. I don't listen to Spotify or anything like that. I curate my own music, and I've got a chill list. So if I want to sort of listen to, my favorite 100 songs, then that's what I can do. But I would escape with music. Sometimes I've pretended to be someone else and escape into another world, a person who's confident, who's a star, who can do everything I can't do, who's popular. So that's what I can escape into. So the purpose of this topic and this episode is really sharing my experiences of depression and how it's kind of been embedded in my life and is something that I've experienced in parallel with anxiety. I am not a therapist. I'm not going to give you theory. I'm not going to tell you what to do. There is a lot of theory out there. I share it, as I always say, to share a story in the hope that you know that you're not alone, to raise awareness for people who may be supporters or don't quite understand and want to educate themselves. If this is something that resonates with you and you're feeling that and you're having trouble articulating it to a loved one, maybe get them to listen to this. Maybe that's a way to bridge and start a conversation. These conversations are really hard. It's really hard to ask for help. And it's really scary to admit the depths of your depression, and especially if you're having suicidal thoughts. It's really important to know to get through, to stick it out. You can get through. What I say to people is take it day by day. If you need to take it hour by hour, take it hour by hour. Sometimes you need to take it minute by minute. Moments matter. Get through each moment. And if you have to clench fist it, metaphorically, to get through, do that. But try and distract yourself if you can. I know energy is very low. Try and eat something healthy if you can. Try and get some fresh air. If you're agoraphobic, just go out. Even pop your head through a window if you can. Or bask in some sunlight in a window. Do what you can. You can also, there's lots of self-care products that you can buy. Treat yourself. Have a bath. Buy some lovely bath bombs or bubbles, or think of really positive things. Buy a face mask. Do your hair. Buy some makeup. Pick some flowers. Whatever it might be. Gardening can be a great self-care. I know a lot of people love that. I love it if I don't have to weed. So that's my problem, that I end up with a lot of weeds. So I hope that's been helpful. It's a really tough topic. I've had a lot of thoughts going through my head as I've spoken this. I could have gone off on a lot of tangents. I've tried to contain them. It is a bit of a longer episode. I apologize for that. This is what happens, that when I talk about this, that, you know, my trauma responses are that my brain can sort of remember something and I'm not expecting to remember. And that has actually happened as I've talked about this. So some of which I haven't actually shared with you. Please, if you can, get professional help. Don't be ashamed of it. It's confidential. Please get onto your 24/7 mental health support lines in your country. Again, I will repeat, in Australia, that's Lifeline on 13 11 14 or Beyondblue on 1300 22 4636. You can also Google in Australia or wherever you are for mental health crisis lines, suicide crisis lines. Please ring up. They're even fantastic now that often the text, they might have forums to get onto, which will be moderated by a professional or a volunteer, but a volunteer who's trained in mental health first aid. So please, there's lots of resources now. What I will leave you with, normally I leave you with a question. So this question is more than a question. It's a consideration. It's a plan. Think about those self-care activities that you can do when you're feeling very low. Anything that will help you get through those moments. Remember, if it's day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute. So what I find is, and a friend actually helped me with this. I remember I was having a low period maybe 10, 12 years ago. And she just gave me a list of all these ideas that I could do. I was like, what a great idea. She's like, why don't you just stick it on the fridge and it's there? And I think sometimes we need wellness to think about those self-care acts that, you know, it's almost like you just have to look and say, oh, that's right. Watching Real Housewives of Beverly Hills makes me feel better, do it. So not that I would forget that, but you get my point that, you know, sometimes listening to music, I can be really stressed and then I'll sort of see my iPod and I'll be like, oh, hang on, why aren't I just chilling out and listening to some music? Why aren't I doing that? Sometimes we self-sabotage and we don't think the acts that actually help us. So yeah, more than a question, think about self-care, any activities that make you feel better. Remember, this is just for you. There's no judgment. You don't have to share it with anyone. Just whatever makes you feel better. Maybe it's looking at old photos. Maybe it's looking at travel pictures. Maybe it's looking at a celebrity crush. I don't know. Whatever sort of makes you feel better. Maybe it's listening to a podcast. Maybe it's doing something. Maybe it's chipping. Maybe it's cleaning. I don't know. Whatever it is, just think of something that makes you feel better. Write it down and have it there as a resource for when you're struggling. I'll leave you with that. Again, I know this has been a heavy topic, but I feel like it's an important one to be open about and talk about. And I hope you found it helpful. I hope that you feel less alone in any of these feelings if you have it. If you've never been depressed, don't feel concerned that that may be you. If it happens, it happens. Just because I've talked about it and shared my experiences doesn't mean that that automatically means you will. But if you do feel any of these depressive feelings or you suspect that you have depression, you are not alone. You can get help. You will get better. With that, please take care of yourself and I will see you next time.